Hi there, this is John for Zencasts, and this is going to be part 2 of my doctrine relations mini set. Over the last couple of weeks, what we've been doing is looking at doctrine 1.2 and seeing how we can integrate it into the Zend Framework. And so this week, what I want to do is, it's actually going to be a very short video, but what we're going to do is we're going to take this lookup list that we put together in the last video, and I'll just show you what kind of code we have behind it. And we're going to turn this into a form. So we're going to be doing some posting back, and basically we're going to do creating, we're going to be doing reading, and we're going to be able to kind of show how easy it is to build these relationships with doctrine. So let's get started. First of all, this is the Zencasts project file, which I'm starting with, which you can of course grab off the Google Code site on the zencast.com site. We've got an index controller right over here with an index action, and basically what it's doing is it's running a static method that we've defined in the car object called findAll. If this all looks a little strange to you right now, I'd suggest going back to a couple videos before where we started looking at doctrine and we defined what are called models, which are basically classes that represent parts of our database. So if you look at car.php here, you'll see that I've created a public static method or a public static function called findAll. And what we're running is just a doctrine query where we're trying to grab whatever's in the car table and just returning it as a collection of objects. In the index controller, I'm taking that set, I'm just running a for each statement around it, and I'm taking the brand property and also the users property. So users is actually a one-to-many to car. So a car has many users, and for each one of those users, I'm just printing that person's name. So if we refresh this again, you'll see that it's Toyota Jane, Nissan John, Chevy, and then Ford, which are just the car brands. So let's clean this up a little bit. The first thing I want to do is make a slight modification to my index action, which is going to be to actually delete all this, because we're going to be rebuilding this in the form, and we're going to be doing this in an MVC style, which is really the way we should be doing it. And then we're going to work on building the form out and doing post back. So in my index.html file, I am going to start by just defining a very simple unordered list. Whoops. And inside here, I'm going to do PHP for each car, findAll as car, and end for each over here. So now I'm using PHP's templating style. I'm going to create an unordered list where we echo the car brand. And inside of that, I'm going to create another unordered list, or rather, we're going to print the car brand here. And then we're going to create another unordered list here where we say PHP for each car users as user, and for each, and another list item here, and we'll echo user name. So this might be a little confusing for someone who isn't a PHP developer, but if you are a PHP developer, this should be something that you're probably a little comfortable with, where we're having a nested loop inside of a loop. We're trying to limit the amount of PHP that we're actually using in our template by creating these one-line statements and really letting PHP work as a templating language. So if I go back to Safari and I refresh this page, now we're going to see Toyota John, Nissan Jane, or Nissan John, Chevy, and Ford. and we get the right kind of hierarchy set up. The next thing I want to do is work on the form. So I'm going to create a form object, or I'm going to create a form tag here. We'll just call it FRM action. We'll just leave this blank. This is the page that it's going to post back to. Method post. And I'm going to have 2 input fields. One for name, and the value is just going to be name, so that's the default value. And I'm going to do another one, and it's going to have email. And I'm going to show you how you can have a very simple one-to-many lookup list be defined in a form. Now, if we were using Zend Form here, which I'll probably cover in another video, it would be very easy to pass in the doctrine collection as a data set to the Zend Form select object, or multi-select input, or multi-input option, or the select option form element, and then have that automatically generate the right key value pair. But for now, we're going to do this manually. I'm going to create a select name, and this is going to be car_ID. And I'm going to explain why I'm setting the name to car_ID in just a minute. And the ID is also going to be car_ID. And again, here we're going to be using PHP's templating language. So for each car, find all as car, and we'll end for each year. Option value equals car ID. And then again, whoops. Car brand. And then close the option tag. So what we're doing here is we're creating an option tag for every single car element that we have in our lookup list. And then last, we of course need a submit button. And it'll be add user. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to refresh this again, and you'll notice that now I've got 2 form fields, name and email, and then a lookup list with all of the various cars that I have. So this is an example where we're basically mapping a user to a car, and then underneath here we've got an example where we've got a car and then we're going back to the user. And of course, with Doctrine, these chains can be, multiple levels deep. You just need to define them in the Doctrine configuration file or in the actual Doctrine models that you create, and then Doctrine will do the rest of the legwork for you. Now, the reason that I called this car ID and name and email is because these things, or these parameter names, or these names here, also correspond with, if I go to user over here and I check the base class that Doctrine has created, we can see that we've got car ID, name, and email. So it becomes very easy for me to persist this, information and just pull it out of the view and into the controller, and then do the necessary save statement through Doctrine, and then have it stored in our database. So let's just finish this up. So in the index controller over here, the first thing I want to do is check to see if we're actually posting back. So we'll have to start with, of course, an if statement. So if this get request, whoops, is post. Then we'll say new user equals new user. New user name equals this get param name. New user email is this get param email. And new user car ID equals this get param car ID. And then just say new user save. Watch what happens. So if here I refresh this again and I put Jane Doe at doe.com, and Jane Doe drives a Ford, and I hit add user, then boom, she's in the database and she shows up and there's no problem. So it's very easy for you to kind of quickly add and remove objects and write forms using Doctrine, even if they are forms that involve lookup lists and relationships. In the next video, what I'm going to be doing is talking a little bit about going back to how we can auto-load Doctrine and how the Doctrine core can be configured. Because since I started this little series, there have been a couple of comments and some really wonderful feedback from the Doctrine developers on how to better prepare your project for Zend Framework 2.0 and the new version of Doctrine, and so on and so forth. Happy holidays, and thanks for listening.